Okay, counsel, let's talk about what we're doing from here on out with this witness. I am not going to allow BCA agents to get up on the stand and tell the jury what a video shows. The video is the evidence, especially when it comes through the mouth of a BCA agent. You know, the jury may get the impression that this person is an expert at looking at video. The jury's going to have that video. They can look at it as much as they want in the jury deliberation room. The state has the right to argue that Officer Johnson wasn't in danger of getting dragged by the car in final argument. That's totally fair game. You know, the state can argue and stop the video in final argument and say, look, both of his feet are on the ground. That's all fair game, but I'm not going to let the witnesses tell the jury what's on there. Okay? As far as the photographs that 403, 405, and 402, I understand that the defense never got those still photographs, correct?
Yes.
And they're not even on the state's witness list or the exhibit list.
Your Honor, the defense did receive those exhibits. This morning we had a 15-minute break for them to review them. That was at approximately shortly before 11 o'clock. They've now had about 2.5 hours to review the still images. They aren't novel per se because they are still images of the videos that they have had for several months. I have not heard any renewed claim that they are continually prejudiced by us being able to introduce these images. These are images which the jury has seen in real time in the video, but these are specific excerpts which have been created so that they are isolated exhibits so that they can be shown to the jury.
Judge, you ruled. We're going to do it for a month.
Yep.
Yes, I am not going to reconsider any of my prior rulings, no matter how many times you want to argue it. Okay, so.
Where the state was seeking clarity, Your Honor, is that this morning it seemed like the court was saying you can't use still images to allow the witness to explain what was observed in the video. Then the state utilized the video and asked the witness to explain what was being seen in the video, and that too was cut out. What the state is asking now is to admit these still images as exhibits, but I will refrain from asking the juror what is specifically occurring in these still images.
I've ruled that the still exhibits, the still photographs, 402, 403, and 405 will not be admitted. The objection is sustained. Okay. All right. Are you ready for the jury?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy. Oh, by the way, one-word objections, please, okay? And say one word, and then if you need to make an argument, we've got to use these buggers, okay? Okay. Thank you, Deputy. Oh, mics. If you're going to be speaking, go to the podium because our poor court reporter can't hear, okay? That also prevents you from talking over each other, right?
Yes, Your Honor. Will do.
Right. Okay, please be seated. All right, members of the jury, I'm sorry for the short delay. Okay, you may continue, Mr. Larson.
I'll be brief. Could you please redisplay Exhibit 204? Agent Peterson, I'm showing you Exhibit 204. Would you agree that this is the video paused exactly at 2:02 p.m.?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right, you may cross, counsel.
Good afternoon, Special Agent Peterson.
Good afternoon.
Would you agree with me that a visual observation being there is much better than a body-worn camera planted on your chest?
A visual observation?
Yes,
What do
you're
you
there
mean?
and you can see everything, and your body-worn camera only takes up a certain amount. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And with respect to hollow point bullets, they're used by law enforcement because they do not leave the body and shoot somebody else. Is that a fair statement?
Generally speaking, yes.
Yeah. And that's why they're used by law enforcement?
Yes.
And does your office use them?
Yes.
And when did you notice in these videos that Johnson's video was a second off of Potter's?
No.
All right. And with respect to the taser statement, you're familiar with tasers?
Yes.
And is when somebody yells taser, 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 that's warning to the other law enforcement officers that are there to back off. Fair statement?
I don't know if it's fair to say to back off.
But to not touch the guy because you might get electrocuted.
That's part of the reason, sure. Yeah.
What's the other reason?
To give warning that the taser is going to be deployed.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Counsel?
Agent Peterson, earlier this morning you testified about your career in the Force Investigations Unit, correct?
Yes.
You've evaluated over 70 claimed reports of excessive force, correct?
Yes.
Including several homicides.
Judge, I object to this. I never went into past experience. It's outside the scope of cross-examination.
I'm getting to a point, Your Honor.
Okay. You may continue for a while.
In your experience, has reviewing body-worn camera footage been a critical aspect of your investigation?
Yes.
And indeed, requesting body-worn camera is a critical request that is made in an investigation.
Same objection, Mayor. I didn't go into requesting body-worn cameras at all.
The objection is sustained beyond the scope.
What would occur if there was no body-worn camera to review in an officer-involved case? If you had no body-worn camera footage?
Object to that is not relevant, Your Honor, and it's also outside the scope.
I am again sustaining the objection outside the scope.
Does body-worn camera footage have certain benefits?
Same objection, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled.
When body-worn camera video exists, are there certain benefits to reviewing that video versus relying on the testimony of witnesses?
I didn't ask that question. It's outside the scope. I talked about visual observation.
Okay, one word objections, please. I'll let you answer that.
Gonna have to repeat it. I'm sorry.
Sure. Does reviewing body-worn camera footage in these cases have advantages at times than simply relying on the testimony or statements of witnesses?
At times, yes.
Yes. No further questions.
Special Agent Peterson, what I asked you was, is a visual observation of something, forget about the testimony, a visual observation of something better than a body-worn camera that has tunnel vision?
It can be, yes. It'll be different.
It's a large, you can see it better if you're there looking at it, than a body-worn camera. Isn't that true? Because you see more?
Yeah, that would be accurate.
Thank you.
Mr. Morrison?
What advantages does reviewing body-worn camera have in your investigation?
Object, Your Honor, outside the scope of recall.
The objection is overruled.
What is the advantage of body-worn camera? It provides a independent depiction of an event
That can be reviewed,
that can be reviewed.
paused,
Yep. Yes.
brought into court as an exhibit?
Yes.
No further questions.
Anything further, Mr. Anything further?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Can you please step down?
Thank you, Your Honor.
The state may call its next witness.
This time, Your Honor, the state calls Michelle Frascone.
Okay. Good afternoon. Will you please stand behind the witness chair? Raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this trial? I do. Please take a seat. Thank you. And would you please remove your mask? State your full name and spell it.
First name is Michelle, last name is Frascone, Michelle. Last name Frascone.
Okay, we have a court reporter taking down everything that's being said. So you have to say yes or no instead of shaking your head. Don't say uh-huh or uh-uh. Only one person can talk at a time. Wait until the question is finished before you answer. If you don't understand a question, ask for clarification. And finally, if an objection is made, stop talking. Don't answer it unless I tell you to.
Thank you.
Counsel?
Would you state your occupation for the record?
I'm a police officer for the state of Minnesota.
What's your current, what law enforcement agency are you with?
I work for the state of Minnesota, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
What is your current rank?
Assistant Special Agent in Charge.
How long have you been with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension?
I have been with them since 2016.
What unit are you currently assigned to?
Currently assigned to the Force Investigative Unit.
Prior to working for the BCA, do I understand that you have prior law enforcement experience?
That's correct.
And what is that?
Prior to coming to the BCA, worked for the city of Woodbury as a police officer.
And that was from 2006 to 2016, correct?
That's correct.
And you're a licensed peace officer still today?
Yes, I am.
And you take continuing education courses to maintain that license?
Yes.
Based on your law enforcement experience, did you acquire specialized knowledge or experience in the use of firearms and other weapons such as tasers?
I did.
If asked, are you able to describe the basic features and functionality of weapons such as firearms and tasers?
I am.
As part of your work in the Force Investigations Unit, do I understand that you've responded or participated in the investigation of over 100 officer-involved shootings,
That's correct.
both as a lead agent and at times a supporting agent?
Correct.
And you were assigned to assist in the investigation of the case involving Kim Potter, correct?
That's correct.
I want to get right to your actions on April 11th of 2001. Do you recall that day?
I do.
And what were you doing?
It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was at home.
Okay. And did you receive a report of an officer-involved shooting in Brooklyn Center which prompted a response from you?
Yes, I did.
And could you describe that response?
I was contacted by my supervisor who requested that I respond to the Brooklyn Center Police Department.
And when did you arrive to the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
I think I arrived around 4 p.m.
When you arrived, were you the first agent at the precinct, or was anyone else from the BCA already present?
Prior to my arrival, Special Agent in Charge Scott Mueller was at the police department.
And what did you do when you first arrived?
When I first arrived, I met with Agent Mueller, who provided me just some general information about what the investigation was involving.
Soon after you met with Agent Mueller, were you joined by another BCA agent?
Yes, I was.
And who was that?
Agent Sam Mcginnis.
At the time after you were briefed by Mueller and spoke to Agent Mcginnis, did you learn who the involved officer or officers were?
Yes, I did.
And who was that?
Officer Kim Potter was the involved officer, and then there were 2 witness officers that were also at the agency.
Was that Officer Lucky and Sergeant Johnson?
That's correct.
Okay. After meeting with Agent Mueller and Agent Mcginnis, what was the next? Who was the next individual who you encountered?
I went into the conference room that Officer Potter was in with her counsel, and then at the point after that, I went upstairs and met with Sergeant Johnson.
Okay, well, let's talk about both of those encounters. You said you went upstairs to see Johnson, so do I understand there's a conference room on a lower level or a main level of the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's where you saw Officer Potter?
Correct.
Was Agent Mcginnis with you as well?
Yes, he was.
When you observed Officer Potter, was she still wearing her uniform?
Yes, she was.
How much time did you spend with her?
A very short amount of time.
Okay. Before that date, did you know her?
I did.
In what capacity?
In a professional capacity, and our husbands had prior worked together many years ago.
Okay. Would you agree that Ms. Potter is sitting here at council table over at the front council table closest to you?
Yes.
Okay. At the time you encountered her, did you observe whether she had a firearm on her duty belt?
Yes, I did.
Did you receive any information about that firearm?
I was advised that that firearm was Sergeant Johnson's firearm.
Okay. What was the first action that you and Agent Mcginnis took when you encountered her?
Photographs were taken of her uniform.
And what happened to the equipment that she was wearing?
It was collected.
Okay. At that time, did you know why she was in possession of Sergeant Johnson's firearm?
I did not.
After the firearm was collected, do you recall what was done with it?
It was placed inside of a box.
Okay. Did you observe at that time whether it was loaded or unloaded?
I did.
And what was it?
It was unloaded.
Unloaded? So you took Sergeant Johnson's gun from Officer Potter. What did you do after that?
I went upstairs and met with Sergeant Johnson.
At some point, did you also speak again with Agent Mueller?
I did.
Did you reveal that you had a prior interaction with Officer Potter?
I did.
And did that affect your involvement in this investigation?
Not a lot. I just asked for, to have other duties assigned to me, and at that time I was assigned to Sergeant Johnson.
Okay. And why did you ask to not have duties related to Officer Potter?
Just out of just making sure that there was no conflict or any issues as a result of it.
Sometimes we use the words appearance of impropriety. You wanted to avoid something like that. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm going to let you answer that objection overruled.
So you said you were tasked with then going to talk to Sergeant Johnson?
That's correct.
And did you bring anything with you when you met with him?
I did.
And what was that?
I brought his handgun upstairs.
Okay. And when you brought his handgun upstairs, what did you anticipate doing?
I wasn't sure of his involvement at the time, so I wanted to make sure that it was with me. Many times we find that supervisors will exchange weapons when they weren't actually have any involvement in the case, and so when I went upstairs to meet with him, there was a possibility that his weapon would be returned. However, I became aware that he was a first-person witness, and so at that time I held on to his handgun and then collected Officer Potter's handgun.
Where did you discover Officer Potter's handgun?
In his holster.
Okay. So you made a plan to collect both firearms at that point?
That's correct.
I now want to discuss your interactions with Sergeant Johnson. How much time did you spend with him?
I guess I would approximate 10 minutes or so.
Did you take any photographs of him?
I did.
At the time, was he wearing Officer Potter's firearm?
Yes, he was.
Did you inspect that firearm to see whether it was loaded or unloaded?
I did.
And was it
It was loaded.
loaded? And what did you do with that firearm after you collected it?
I secured it in a box for our crime scene.
When you collected both firearms, did you document them by serial number to ensure that they were distinguished?
I did.
Okay. And to whom did you bring those firearms after you documented them?
Agent Mcginnis.
Agent Mcginnis. I now want to show you just a few photographs. Could you please put up Exhibit 176? I'm showing you Exhibit 176. It says, can you recognize which gun this is?
Yes.
Which gun is this?
Officer Potter's.
Take a look again. It's the unloaded firearm.
I apologize. Sergeant Johnson's.
Thank you. You said you took several photographs of Officer Johnson. If I showed you two photos of them, would you recognize them?
Yes.
At this time, the state offers Exhibits 84 and 85, photographs of Sergeant Johnson. 84 and 85, sir?
Any objection? Exhibits 84 and 85 will be admitted and you may publish.
Please show 84. Agent Frascone, I'm showing you Exhibit 84. Is this the picture of Sergeant Michael Johnson as you saw him on April 11th?
Yes.
Now Exhibit 85. Could you describe what's shown here in Exhibit 85?
That would be Officer Potter's handgun, showing that it was loaded and contained within Sergeant Johnson's holster.
Okay. I'd now like to show Exhibit 178, which is already admitted into evidence. Do you recognize which gun this is?
I do.
Which gun is this?
This is Officer Potter's handgun.
Okay. And does it also include the ammo that you discovered in the firearm?
Correct.
Okay. And then Exhibit 179. Again, just a close-up of that serial number, correct?
That's correct.
And then Exhibit 180. Again, the loaded magazine that you discovered.
Correct.
Okay. And then again, Agent Frascone, I'll show you exhibit. I'll speak into the mic in a second. Exhibit 199, would you agree this is Officer Potter's firearm?
Correct.
And that was Exhibit 199. No further questions, Your Honor.
Is there any cross?
No cross.
All right. Step down.
Thank you.
The state may call its next witness.
At this time, the state calls Agent Sam Mcginnis.
Good afternoon. Okay, please stand behind the witness chair and raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this cause?
I do, Your Honor.
Please have a seat. Remove your mask, please. And state your full name and spell it.
Sam Mcginnis, SAMMCGINNIS.
All right, the court reporter is taking down everything that's being said. So say yes or no instead of shaking your head. Don't say uh-huh or If you don't understand a question, let the lawyer know. If an objection is made, stop talking and don't answer the question unless I tell you to. Okay? Only one person can talk at a time, so wait till the question's finished before you answer.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Could you please state your occupation for the record?
I'm a senior special agent with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, currently in the Force Investigations Unit,
How long have you been employed by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension?
since April of 2020.
Do you have law enforcement experience prior to joining the BCA?
I do.
Could you please recount that for the jury?
I was with the Waseca Police Department from 2011 to 2015. From 2015 to 2020, I was with the Mankato Department of Public Safety.
Could you describe your assignments when you worked for the Mankato Police Department?
I started there as a patrol officer. I worked my way through investigations, working narcotics, and I left there as a patrol sergeant.
Did you have any specialized experience with firearms?
I did. One of my collateral duties was a firearms instructor.
And that required an additional certification, correct?
I did.
And you're still a licensed peace officer and take continuing education courses to maintain that license?
Correct.
Would you agree that you have acquired specialized training and experience in both firearms and tasers?
The basic functions, yes.
Yep. And if asked, you are able to describe the basic features and functionality of both firearms and tasers, correct?
Yes.
Now, the jury has already heard testimony about what the Force Investigations Unit does, but I want to specifically focus on what you did on April 11th. Okay, sir?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall that day?
I do.
And did you receive some information that prompted a response from you?
I did.
And what was that information?
I was contacted by ASAC Mike Phil concerning a fatal officer-involved shooting that occurred in Brooklyn Center. He informed me that the driver was deceased. There was one officer that had shot or discharged their firearm, and two officers that had been on scene during the incident.
And was there a request for you to respond somewhere?
Yes.
Where did you go?
ASAC Phil requested that I respond directly to the Brooklyn Center Police Department.
When did you arrive?
Approximately a little after 1600 hours.
Okay. We know that was 4 p.m.
Correct.
When you arrived, were you the first agent there?
I was not.
Who else was present?
Special Agent in Charge Scott Mueller and Assistant Special Agent in Charge Michelle Frascone were already on scene.
Did you have a conversation with them prior to beginning your investigation?
I did.
And were you given an initial task?
I was.
What was that task?
I was tasked with photographing and collecting the equipment from Officer Kim Potter.
Okay. And did you meet with Officer Potter at the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
I did.
And she's seated here at council table?
Yes, sir.
At the time that you encountered her, was she still wearing her uniform?
She was.
Was she in possession of her duty belt?
She was.
Was she in possession of a firearm?
She was.
Did you receive any information about that firearm?
After our interaction together, I did, yes.
Yep. And you learned that that was Sergeant Johnson's firearm, correct?
I did.
Was that a loaded or unloaded firearm?
Unloaded.
Did you ultimately take photographs of her?
I did.
Did those photographs include her wearing the duty belt, firearm, and taser that she had on her person?
Yes.
After taking those photographs, do you recall what you did? Next.
I do.
What was that?
I collected her equipment to include her duty belt.
Okay. Did you collect that firearm?
I did.
And where did that go?
That went into a box and then into ASAC Frascone's custody.
And when you collected it, did you confirm that it was unloaded?
Yes.
Okay. After the firearm was removed, you testified that you did collect that duty belt.
Yes.
And could you describe what is all contained in a typical officer's duty belt?
Typically, a firearm, a set of keys, spare magazines for said firearm, flashlight, mace, handcuffs, radio, Taser baton.
Is the placement of items on an officer's duty belt something that a typical officer plans out and does deliberately?
Yes,
When you collected the duty belt, did you separate the taser from the duty belt, or did it remain in its holster?
it remained in its holster.
How much time did you spend with Officer Potter?
Altogether, maybe 2 hours.
2 hours. Do I understand that you, at one point, went to North Memorial Hospital where she provided a blood sample,
Yes,
and then you returned back to the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
myself, Officer Potter left from the hospital and didn't return.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. When you returned to the Brooklyn Center Police Department, did you have another encounter with Agent Frascone?
I did.
And did she provide you any evidence at that point?
She did.
What did she provide you?
2 firearms.
And at that point, did she describe to you which firearm was Potter's and which firearm was Sergeant Johnson's?
Yes,
And did you document that in a chain of custody form that's used by the BCA?
yes.
After you collected the firearms from Agent Frascone, can you tell the jury where you brought those firearms?
I brought those 2 firearms along with the blood sample or blood kit to the crime scene team leader, Melissa Loren, and signed them over to her custody.
Okay. At this time, I want to show the jury the photographs that you took of the defendant. The state offers at this time exhibits 210 to 213.
Exhibits 210 to 213 will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
First, I'm showing you exhibit 210. Do you recognize this?
I do.
What is this?
It's a picture that I took of Officer Potter.
And this is her standing, looking straight towards you, right?
Correct.
Front, face forward. Okay. And can you see the taser in her holster?
Yes,
And what side of her body does she have that holster?
her left side.
Okay. Published 213, 211. Pardon me, 211. And what? This is another photograph of Officer Potter, correct?
Yes,
And to which direction is she standing in 211?
she's showing me her right side.
Okay. And this is the side that she held her firearm?
Correct.
Okay. 212? I'm showing you exhibit 212. What's shown here?
Her left side.
Okay. And this is, again, as you testified, the side where she's wearing her taser?
Correct.
Okay. And then 213. For completeness, this is what Officer Potter looked like from behind, correct?
Correct.
Right. Now, do you know whether, you can take that down, do you know whether the duty belt and taser that you collected from the defendant were photographed?
They were.
And you've seen a set of photographs prior to trial, correct?
I have.
The state offers exhibits 214 to 225, Your Honor. These are photographs of the duty belt and taser.
Any objection? Those exhibits will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please show 214. We'll try to do these in a series, Agent Mcginnis, and I'll ask you what is shown, and if you could please just fulsomely describe what you see, I think we can go pretty efficiently. I'm showing you Exhibit 214. What is shown here?
Officer Potter's duty belt laying flat on a table.
Exhibit 215. What's shown here?
Her taser out of the holster.
216. What is shown here?
Officer Potter's empty firearm holster.
Okay. And right next to the firearm holster, these are some of the items which you described an officer typically carries on a duty belt.
Yes, sir.
Exhibit 217. Would you agree that 217 is another more close-up image of the firearm holster?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit 218. Just a more close-up image of the firearm holster, correct?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit 219. just another image of how the firearm holster is mounted on the duty belt. Is that correct, sir?
Correct.
Exhibit 220. What does Exhibit 220 show you?
Officer Potter's empty Taser holster.
Exhibit 221. Another photo of the Taser holster, correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 222. Another photo of the Taser holster, correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 223. Would you agree this is a side view of the Taser holster?
Yes.
Could you describe what the black piece of plastic on that Taser holster is?
The one that looks like a lever, if you will.
Okay, a lever.
It's a security mechanism. It once the Taser is inside of the holster, it's retained there by that security mechanism and can't be brought out again until that is pushed and the Taser is released.
And then Exhibit 224. This is just a straight image of the Taser. Is that correct, Exhibit 224?
Yes, sir.
And then 225? What is shown here?
Just the bottom of Officer Potter's Taser showing the serial number and the department number on it.
Thank you. Put that down. Based on your examination of the defendant and the defendant's equipment, could you testify about how she had her weapons holstered to enable her to draw them?
They were both in what I would call a straight draw position. So both the rear handles of the Taser and the gun would be facing her rear.
How was the firearm? Pardon me. How would Officer Potter be able to pull the firearm from her firearm holster?
Her firearm was on her dominant side, which you have to use your right hand to draw.
Yep. Was there any safety mechanisms or straps that were holding it into the holster?
Yes.
What was that? Could you describe that?
That particular holster has a snap retention system, same concept. It's a security mechanism. Once the firearm is in the holster and that snap is, placed on, the firearm cannot be removed until that snap is released.
Okay. And you would unsnap that snap with your dominant hand, with your right hand?
Yes.
Okay. What about the Taser on the left side? How is that unholstered?
Again, breaking that retention system or pushing that lever, and then using your non-dominant hand.
Okay. Am I correct that the defendant's duty belt and Taser were stored at the BCA during the pendency of this case?
Yes.
When the BCA stored these items, were they altered or manipulated in any way?
No.
Do you agree that the belt was transported here to the Hennepin County Government Center in preparation for trial?
Yes.
And did you see that belt and its contents again while here at the Government Center?
I did.
And when you did you take some action to alter that duty belt prior to trial?
Yes.
And what was that?
The holster, the firearm holster and the Taser holster were both removed from the duty belt
And why was that done?
to be shown in court.
If I showed you these actual items we've been discussing, would you recognize them?
Yes.
Okay. Let's start with the duty belt. The state offers Exhibit 378.
378 will be admitted into evidence, and you may show the agent that exhibit.
Agent Mcginnis, I'm showing you Exhibit 378. You recognize this item.
Yes.
And what is this?
Officer Potter's duty belt.
Would you agree it's the duty belt, but without the two holsters?
I would.
State offers at this time Exhibit 379, the firearm holster.
Any objection? 379 will be admitted, and you may approach the witness.
Let's try something. Mcginnis, I'm showing you on the view screen here, Exhibit 379, correct?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree this is the firearm holster?
I would.
All right, I'm going to stop this. You testified earlier about a snap. Is this the snap that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so when you're holding it on the right side like this is the snap that must be depressed to take the whole, firearm off?
To release the firearm, yes.
Counsel, counsel, you need to stay behind the podium.
That's fine. Your Honor.
Okay.
Next, the state offers Exhibit 380, the taser holster.
Oh, that exhibit will be admitted?
Thank you, Your Honor. Agent Mcginnis, you recognize this as the taser holster, Exhibit 380?
Yes.
And the clasp or the lever that you talked about is still functioning today?
Yes.
Now I want to show you the actual taser. State offers Exhibit 203.
Any objection? 203 will be admitted?
Permission to approach and to hand the exhibit to the witness for demonstration.
May.
I have a question first. Agent Mcginnis, you now are in possession of Exhibit 203. Could you describe this taser's general features?
It's a Taser 7, model Taser 7, yellow in color. It has a safety switch on it, a battery in the bottom of it.
Could you hold up the taser and show the jury the safety switch? If you have that safety switch in the disarmed position, can that be fired?
No.
To activate it, you have to flip the safety switch, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. And one moment ago, deputy came over and provided you a live battery, correct?
Correct.
All right. What will happen when you turn on that battery, based on your training experience?
When I put the battery in and activate the Taser,
Yeah.
it will show the, it'll arm it and show the lasers, the CID screen, and the flashlight.
Okay. When you say it'll show the CID screen, could you describe where that's going to come from?
From the back, it shows the information about the Taser, the battery level, and the probe status.
Okay, and you testified that there's also lasers?
Yes.
Okay, could you tell the jury what is shot out the end of that taser once you arm it?
There are aiming lasers that I guess show you where to fire. The Taser probes.
Okay. At this time, Agent Mcginnis, I'd ask you to stand up, stay behind the witness box there, and to activate the taser to show the LED lights, the lasers, and the flashlight. Thank you. Agent Mcginnis, without pointing the taser at Judge Chu, could you please show the back end of that taser to the jury? Thank you. You can please disarm that taser, and could you remove that battery so it could be collected by the deputy? All right, I want to get back to some investigative work you did in this case. Did you ever visit the crime scene?
Briefly.
Okay. Just to bring the firearms to Melissa Loren?
Yes.
In addition to the evidence that you obtained from Officer Potter, did you collect other evidence?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of what you gathered, would you agree you gathered a lot of the documentation in this case?
Yes.
That include paperwork, records, policies, etc.?
Correct.
Did you also participate in a number of witness interviews?
Yes.
And you collected reports from various officers?
Yes.
I want to talk, not about those per se, but your events on May 4th. Do you recall meeting with witnesses at the Brooklyn Center Police Department on May 4th?
Yes.
Okay, who were those witnesses?
Commander Garrett Flesland and Sergeant Mike Peterson.
Was that a scheduled meeting?
It was.
What was the purpose of the meeting?
To upload Officer Potter's data from her taser.
And to do that, did you have to then bring Officer Potter's taser, the one you just held in your hand, back to the police department?
Yes.
And what sort of data did you hope to obtain from that?
The records of use, a full audit of the taser, make sure it's functioning properly, things of that nature.
Okay. And did you receive insistence in getting that information off of the taser?
I did.
And how was that performed?
Sergeant Mike Peterson removed the battery from the taser and put it in the docking station at the Brooklyn Center Police Department, and then uploaded the data onto their computer system.
And then you end up getting a report from that, correct?
Sergeant Peterson printed out a copy of the audit for me, yes.
And then you provided it to you.
Correct.
Okay. What did you learn regarding who had possessed that taser prior to coming into possession of it yourself?
I learned that Officer Potter was the only one that had possession of that taser, at least in the field.
Okay. And when did she gain possession of it?
March 26th, I believe.
Did you receive any other information about the taser's functionality?
Yes.
And whether it was functioning at that time?
It was.
Okay. Now, was there any data that you received regarding when the taser had been function tested?
Yes.
What is a function test?
It's a test you perform on the taser to make sure the core electronics are working properly. So an internal and external check.
Are you familiar with how often an officer is supposed to perform a function test?
Yes.
How often?
According to the Brooklyn Center Police Department taser policy, they should perform a spark test before each shift.
If an officer has a taser on their duty belt, how would the officer have to remove that taser to perform the function test?
Yes.
Now, have you heard of a function test also being called a spark test?
Yes.
Why is it called a spark test?
The spark test name comes from when you arc the taser to make sure that it's working properly.
So part of the function test is actually not only turning it on, but causing an electrical current to be shot through it,
Correct.
or sparked. In the information that you received in the report, did the report indicate when and whether a function test was performed on particular days?
Yes.
All right. Slightly related topic. In addition to the taser data, did you gather information about when Officer Potter worked since March 26th?
Yes.
And how did you receive that information?
Commander Flesland emailed me a copy, the days she had worked.
Okay. And do you recall how many shifts Officer Potter worked between March 26th and April 11th?
Yes.
How many?
10.
If I showed you that email again, would you recognize it?
Yes.
State Offers Exhibit 226.
226 will be admitted and you may publish.
There we go. Agent Mcginnis, let's zoom in here. I'm showing you Exhibit 226. Would you agree this is a copy of Commander Flesson's email to you?
Yes.
And right here, we've zoomed in on the pertinent portion of the email. This would recount Officer Potter's work history from March 26th to April 11th, correct?
Correct.
And essentially, she worked March 26th, 7th, and 8th, March 31st and April 1st, April 5th and 6th, and then April 9th, 10th, and 11th, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You can take that down. Once you had that work schedule, what did you do with that information?
I cross-referenced it to the Taser audit showing when function tests or spark tests were conducted and when they weren't.
Did you draw any conclusions?
I did.
What were those conclusions?
Officer Potter had conducted function test or spark test on her Taser 6 out of the 10 shifts.
But not all 10.
No.
Do you recall the last occasion when she performed the function test?
April the 9th.
April 9th? So she worked on April 10th and 11th and did not perform the function test on either day.
Correct.
All right. Excuse me. One word objections, please. It has been asked and answered. Please move on.
Thank you.
And no more speaking objections. All right? Okay.
I do want to talk more about these function tests. And I don't want to repeat your testimony, but you did conclude that there were days on which the function test was not performed, correct?
Correct.
Now, Agent Mcginnis, you were a police officer for 10 years. In terms of your investigation, was this information that you learned about her failure to function test noteworthy?
It was.
The objection is sustained.
Was her failure to function test, based on your understanding of Brooklyn Center policy, a violation of that policy?
I think you need more foundation for that, counsel. I'm going to sustain the objection for lack of foundation.
You previously testified that you understood, Agent Mcginnis, that the function test was something that needed to be performed every day before officer shift, correct? You testified to that?
Yes.
Okay. And then you also testified about information about when that was not done by Officer Potter, correct?
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
Just doing the math here. Based on that information in your investigation, did you conclude that she violated that policy?
I'm going to sustain the objection for lack of foundation.
Okay. Did let's say this, your results, your conclusions that she did not function test, those are, you found no information to the contrary, correct?
Correct.
Now, earlier we discussed the collection of the firearm used by Officer Potter and that you provided that to Melissa Loren, correct?
Correct.
Do you know whether after it was inventoried, there was further examination of that firearm?
I am aware that there was, yes.
Yep. And that additional work was done by forensic scientists, not you?
Yes.
Now, you did, though, have an opportunity to view and examine that firearm on a later occasion, correct?
Yes.
And you'd agree that you'd be able to recognize that firearm if I showed it to you?
Yes.
And
What is the question, counsel?
asking Agent Mcginnis, agent, to identify the firearm, Your Honor.
Well, that's already been done. The objection is sustained.
Yep. Can we have a sidebar, Your Honor?
The objection is overruled.
Could you show Exhibit 178 to the witness, please?
Recognize the
Firearm in Exhibit 178.
Yes,
Is that Officer Potter's firearm?
it appears to be yes.
And if I showed you that same very firearm, in actuality, would you recognize it?
Yes,
Okay, I'm now showing you Exhibit 199. This also is Officer Potter's firearm?
yes,
Now, do you recall taking the firearm and the Officer Potter's taser on May 6th of 2021?
yes.
Okay, describe the circumstances that prompted you to be in possession of both of those items.
Myself, Melissa Loren, and one of our crime scene photographers, one of our special agents, we're going to take pictures of the items and weigh them.
And did you use a scale provided by the BCA Crime Lab?
Yes,
And when you weighed the firearm, what was included in that weight?
ammunition.
17 rounds of live ammunition?
Correct.
And why did you weigh the firearm with ammo?
That would represent what was in the firearm the day of the incident.
And did you, you weighed both items, correct?
Correct.
Did you document the weights of those items?
Yes.
Okay, what were the results?
The firearm weighed approximately 2.11 pounds. The taser weighed approximately 0.94 pounds.
So the Glock with the ammo weighed about over twice as much as the taser.
The objection is overruled. I'll let you answer.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to discuss for a moment some other differences beyond weight between the Glock and the taser. Could you please put up simultaneously exhibits 224 and 178? Was identifying differences between these two weapons something that you did in the course of your investigation?
Yes.
And can you identify some of the differences for the jury at this time?
Yes.
Okay, please.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
Thank you.
The taser is yellow. The firearm is black. The taser has a stocky body to it compared to the Glock handgun. The grip of the taser is shorter and wider than the Glock.
Let's pause on that. How much shorter is the handle on the taser?
I don't know the exact number, but when you're holding the taser, I guess you can't get all your fingers on it.
Okay, like your pinky finger?
Correct.
Okay. What about the texture of the grip?
The Glock handgun is textured a majority of the way around it, including the back. The Taser 7 has some light texturing on the sides, but not on the back. The Glock trigger is curved. The Taser trigger is flat with some serrations cut into it. The Taser has an external, on and off switch or safety. The Glock does not.
What does the Glock have in terms of a safety mechanism?
Technically, it has an internal safety, and then it's not really a safety, but the button on the trigger, it would need to be pushed in along with the trigger to be set off.
Okay. And so, and then previously you've already shown the jury in the demonstration the lasers and the LED lights?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any lasers or LED lights on the firearm?
There is not.
And you've already testified as to the differences between the holsters, correct?
Yes.
And the hands which are used to unholster the weapons.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll let the answer stand.
Thank you.
Do you want to move on, counsel?
Yep. I now would like to show you another object. Permission to approach the witness with Exhibit 183. Agent Mcginnis, I'm showing you an item marked for identification as Exhibit 381. Do you recognize this?
I do.
And what is this?
A Taser 7.
And do you know the origin of this Taser 7?
I believe it belongs to the BCA.
How is it different from the Taser that we've seen today?
It's newer. That's about it. Unused.
What about with regard to the probes?
I believe there are training probes in there.
So these are not live probes that are functional?
To my knowledge, yes.
And what about the battery, based on your experience with this particular item?
It is not a live battery, or is not charged.
Okay, so besides the probes and the battery, is this item identical to Officer Potter's Taser?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 381 as a demonstrative exhibit.
No objection for as a demonstrative exhibit only.
Okay. Yes, 381 will be a court exhibit. It will not be admitted into evidence because it's demonstrative only.
Now, Agent Mcginnis, we went through some of the differences between the firearm and the Taser pretty quickly. Would you agree that a person can experience some of these differences better when holding the weapons in their hands?
Yes.
The objection is overruled. I'll let the answer stand.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, permission to publish Exhibits 381 and Exhibit 199, utilizing the services of a deputy by inviting jurors to place their hands on each exhibit here in court.
Counsel, sidebar, please. The objection is sustained. I think if there was an objection, members of the jury, you're going to be able to see the Taser and the handgun when you're in deliberations. It won't have a battery in it, so it won't be functional.
We won't have a live battery, correct.
Okay.
I have no further questions for this witness at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, counsel.
Good afternoon, Agent Mcginnis.
Good afternoon, sir.
This Taser 7 is a new version of the Taser. Am I right about that?
Yes.
It just came out
Yes.
in the spring of 2021,
Somewhere in that area.
or it was just purchased by Brooklyn Center in March.
That's what
This year.
I was told, yes.
In fact, the only person who had a Taser 7 was, at the time, Officer Potter in that department.
Are you asking me, sir?
I'm asking you, yeah.
I'd have to take your word for it. I'm not sure how many they had rolled out at that time.
So, the Taser 7, or the Tasers in general, have a handle that is similar to a gun, correct? There are differences, of course, but it's designed so you hold it in your hand, right?
Correct.
It's designed so that you pull a trigger like a gun, right?
They both have triggers, yes.
And it's designed so you aim at somebody, right?
Yes.
And while this Taser 7 is yellow in color, the top is black, is it not?
Yes, there is black on the top.
And the handle itself is black, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know from your investigation that this Taser was working all the way through the 10 shifts that Officer Potter had it. Is that correct?
Yes.
In fact, on that day in May, you tested the battery power of the Taser, did you not?
Yes.
You found that the battery was 78% charge, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Well enough to fire the Taser, of course.
Yes.
Right? And it was a brand new gun, right?
Taser.
Right? Yeah, a Taser. It was a brand new Taser.
Yes.
So it would be fair to assume that it would be in working order, a brand new gun. Is that correct?
Taser.
Yeah, a Taser. Sorry,
Yes.
there is a confusion here between a Taser and a gun. So you would assume that a Taser that was fully charged or charged at 78% worked throughout the 10 shifts, correct?
Depending on what it started at, yes.
But you have no evidence whatsoever that this Taser wasn't operable, do you?
Correct.
And we have Officer Potter sometimes doing the test, the charge test, or whatever it's called. What's it called again?
The spark
The
test.
spark test, okay. But she did it 6 out of 10 times, right?
Yes.
And it worked, right?
Yes.
Do you have a percentage of the officers in Brooklyn Center who skipped that spark test?
I do not.
You also tried to find, or did find, an answer to the question of whether she had deployed her Taser since she was assigned that Taser. Did you not?
Yes.
And you found out that she had not deployed it whatsoever. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the last spark test was on the 9th rather than the 11th. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You have no evidence between those 2 days that somehow, some way, that Taser was no longer functioning. Is that correct?
No, sir.
And you also took Officer Potter in for a blood sample. Is that right?
Yes.
And she willingly went to I believe it was North Memorial. Is that right?
Yes, she did consent to the blood
She
draw.
She consented to the blood sample, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know the results of that sample.
Yes, sir.
There was nothing in her blood.
Correct.
No alcohol, no marijuana, nothing.
No, sir.
All the screens were taken. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
May I pause for a second? During your investigation, did you ever inquire of the Taser manufacturer why the Taser couldn't be shaped in a different fashion to avoid any confusion? Did you ever do that?
The objection is overruled. You may answer if you know.
Could you repeat that question,
Did you ever
sir?
inquire of the Taser manufacturer why it has built a unit like this when they could easily have shaped it differently?
I did not, and I do not know why.
Thank you.
You may go ahead and be direct.
Agent Mcginnis, you've testified about the Brooklyn Center function test policy. Does that policy permit an officer to not put their hands on that Taser if they think it's working?
Wait a second. Beyond the scope,
Excuse me. I don't understand the question. Do you want to rephrase that?
Sure. The Brooklyn Center function test policy requires that an officer test it every day, correct?
Before each shift, yes.
Was there any exception in that policy?
No.
I think I had previously stated that it lacked foundation. I don't know if you've established with this witness that he's aware of Brooklyn Center policy.
Respect. Agent Mcginnis, over the course of your investigation, did you review the Brooklyn Center conductive energy device policy?
It's overruled. Counsel, do you want to re-ask that question?
Agent Mcginnis, we were just discussing Brooklyn Center, the Taser policy, correct? Specifically the function test policy.
Correct.
And you testified on direct examination that it was required prior to every shift, correct?
Correct.
By the officer. The officer has to put it in their hands and conduct the function test.
It doesn't say that, but yes.
Okay. The policy does say, it's quote, members carrying the Taser device should perform a spark test on the unit prior to every shift.
Correct.
There is no exception.
No.
Thank you. Agent Mcginnis, are you familiar with the model prior to the Taser 7, the Taser X26P?
I believe there's one in between there,
What model is that?
or it's at the same time, the X26P, then the X2.
X2? Are you familiar with the basic layout of those particular versions of Tasers?
Yes.
Do those have a similar external safety switch as what we saw in the X7?
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
No further questions. Thank you.
Are you familiar with the custom and practices of individual officers within the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
I am not.
Anything further?
No, thank you.
Okay, you may step down.
Thank you, Honor.
All right, members of the jury. Oh, wait. You can go ahead.
You going to leave that Taser?
No. I'm going to excuse the jury first. Could you sit down? I'm sorry. All right. Members of the jury, we're going to take our afternoon break, 20 minutes. Okay, please be seated. Yes, you may step down. And I think Mr. Larson. Okay, counsel. Let's take a break.